Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same. There's a pink one and a green one and a blue one and a yellow one. They're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same. All right, singing is not my forte. I apologize. So, in any case, the point of the song that I was singing was a lot of the places we work feel like more of what the song is all about. Just many, many, many homes piled on top of each other in these townhomes and condominium complexes. And it's quite apparent in our area. Back in the 60s, it was mostly small individual homes, but in the 70s, it got so crowded that these condos and townhomes, they just started popping up everywhere. And the overcrowding was excessive. But a lot of times there are trees that were already there that they tried to work around. And as we all know, construction around an existing tree root system can be devastating.
You know, a lot of our jobs are dealing with yards that are just way overplanted with the wrong species of tree. Now, this is a very typical job for us, where we go into a residential neighborhood and everything is landscaped beautifully and there's flowers and everything's growing, and the client wants to retain everything. But let's use this persimmon here as an example. This persimmon, we've already reduced it and brought it in by about 6 feet all the way around. And it was overwhelming the space, as well as this purple leaf flowering pear. We brought this down by about 4 feet, and we had another issue with this one. It was all over the roof, and they've got solar panels, and it was all the way down to the ground, so she wanted to get more light in here. So a lot of our work isn't necessarily what's right for the tree. It's more about what's right for the client. And if the client is insistent upon keeping the trees, then we have to keep the trees small enough. So they've got a couple of crab apples, flowering crab apples here. This one's, this stake needs to come off. It's been there way, way too long. This one over here, I already took the stake off, but they're under the canopy of this big live oak. So we can prune them back and hopefully they'll thicken up a little bit, but she planted them because she likes the flowers, she likes the color. But you know, as everybody knows, you can't have everything. Something's got to give. So we make a lot of allowances for, you know, if the only way to keep a tree is to keep it condensed and keep it shaped up, it becomes an annual job, a maintenance job. But you know, it is what it is. And I don't know about a lot of you out there, that the kind of work that you do, but this is a big part of the type of work that we have to do. We have to keep up with trees that, you know, oftentimes have been butchered by other arborists or other tree companies. Hopefully arborists don't butcher the trees, but a lot of tree guys that don't understand do. So we take it one tree at a time. Here Jorge's working on that big southern magnolia over there, which is not big at all. That thing's going to get huge. So I advised her to leave that one alone, because that's a kind of a sensitive tree that, you know, we're just taking out the dead bits and cleaning out the inside. It's got a Crape Myrtle here that's developing nicely. It's never been attacked. Little flowering cherry here. Now this is an interesting tree over here. This is called a carrot wood, and they get pretty big. They like warmer climates. I've seen a lot of them down Southern California. They're not a real common tree here, but she planted that because she wanted some shade on the house, and now she's got too much shade. And if we don't condense this tree, if we don't keep it more compact, it's going to own this space. So that'll choke out the Crape Myrtle and choke out the other flowering pear and all of our other plants. So we, you know, a lot of times what we're trying to do is find the balance, but that equates to a high maintenance type of a project. So you've really got to keep up with these things every single year. An apple tree here that is probably not going to bear too many apples, but it was let go for several years and it was just a mess. So, you know, her vegetable garden was important. She needed sun. So I recommended to her to cut it back reasonably hard. And next year she'd get more apples, but we cut a lot of the buds off of this tree, and sometimes it is what it is. You gotta do what you have to do for the space. You know, this tree, I mean, this tree was all over the roof. It was up in the wires. It was all over the place. A lot of long shoots on it. Welcome to California. We grow artichokes out here. Look at that. That's beautiful. Oh, here's a pretty plant. You know, there's over 500 cultivars of Japanese maple, and this is a very unusual one. Look at the leaves on it. It's very, very unusual. Look at that. There's a couple of leaves that are fairly normal on this plant, but most of them are these. Look at that. That is coming from here, and most of the leaves, wow. I always find it unusual when a tree leaves out with different shaped leaves throughout the whole plant. This is yet another Japanese maple. Lemon tree, too crowded. There's a pear tree back there. So lemon tree takes dominance, so we're gonna bring it down a little bit because it's too big. Everything she's got is way, way, way too big. Over on this side of the yard, they wanted privacy for their backyard, which is great. But, you know, there's two Tristania trees right here where there should have been one. And had one been planted appropriately, it would have taken longer to fill in, but you would have had a balance that you could have dealt with. And then there's yet another Crape Myrtle there. You can see how the Japanese maple doesn't have hardly any foliage on the backside because it's being shadowed out by the larger dominant tree. And that's what happens in a lot of these yards. People want more and more and more. Now this is kind of interesting. This is a graft. This is a flowering cherry. And flowering cherries are unusual because the graft that's attached to it, oftentimes you'll get a disparity in the rate of growth. You'll have the trunk grow really fast and the graft unions, the graft branches will grow much, much slower. So you have this unusual, if you follow the grain, I've cut down a lot of these that have died, you follow the grain that kind of works its way up into the branches and kind of compresses. So a lot of times these flowering cherries don't live that long. There's another Japanese maple. And another Japanese maple, and you can see how much is going on in this yard. This is a beautiful tree over here. This is a Hinoki cypress, and this tree is 30 years old. They planted this 30 years ago, and the gardeners have been keeping up with it. They haven't been overdoing it. It looks nice. Pretty much the only thing I would do is just shake out some of this dead, and that's it. This is a real low maintenance conifer. I really like these plants. I know of some Hinoki cypress that are over 100 years old at a place called Hakone Gardens. It's a Japanese gardens in Saratoga, and those trees are only about 30 feet tall, and they were planted in 1918. I hope you enjoyed this little tour of a typical yard in Saratoga.
Now we get other types of jobs. We get view jobs. These large manzanitas were blocking the view of the Monterey Bay, and she wanted to get rid of this one, and I thought, you know, that's a really pretty plant. Let me see what I can do with it. So I started raising it up. It's still not done. It's got a lot more to go. I'm kind of giving you an overview of this last week's worth of jobs, and yesterday we got into a big deodar cedar, which was also in a condominium complex. Believe it or not, this tree was planted in the 70s and it exploded. A lot of times some of the species of trees which don't really belong are planted in these complexes, and they can get excessively large far too fast. And trees that grow too fast, that are out of their native habitat, often develop weaknesses like that crack in the limb that I'm pointing to right there. And the reason we're out here is many, many limbs were breaking on this big deodar cedar. They were cracking and breaking. There was a bunch of limbs that were hung up in the tree, and it's close to the pool area, so it's a high traffic area. Plus, that was an area they wanted to be enhanced for, the fact that there was so many people that attend this area, that come to the area. Of course, with the COVID-19, even the pool was closed down, which was kind of odd. And there's the tree all finished. You notice that we didn't overdo it. We didn't overstrip it out. Lots of times I see this variety of tree just completely stripped out. Guys will get up there and they'll start trimming it with a chainsaw. It's like every other limb all the way through. A client might say, we need more light, and that's how they do it. And there's a liquid amber that was butchered a few years ago. It was topped down to 10 feet. Those are olives. We get a lot of those. Here's a Chinese elm. I've spoken at great lengths of Chinese elms, and you can see where this tree was completely butchered at one time. It was cut down to just stumps. Now, I don't know why people do this in the first place, but I think a lot of it has to do with tree companies talking them into doing this kind of work, saying it's like a haircut, it'll grow back. Well, the decay is always going to stay. The decay is always going to be there. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little tour of California trees.